Hi, everyone. My name is Angie Viscianen, and I am the founder of Leg Up Legal. We provide a mentoring program that connects prospective law students to lawyers for mentoring so they can learn more about the legal profession before they dive right in. And we've been hosting these Zoom meetups for pre-law students, current law students, and young lawyers to learn more about topics that'll help you in your legal career. So I'm very excited today to introduce Renwei Chung. He's going to be talking to you today about social capital. So Renwei, I'll let you take it away.
Sure. Good to meet everyone today. This conversation or this chat presentation is repurposed from one I did in 2018 in Denver for a diversity and inclusion conference, really targeted towards law students and junior attorneys, but anyone can use the advice. It's nothing new, but it might be presented or talked about in a different form or fashion. I think you'll really appreciate it. I am reading off a deck, and I'll share this with Angie. So if anyone wants the deck, feel free to reach out to her, and we can make sure to send it to you after the presentation. And feel free to ask any questions in the meantime or throughout the conversation, and happy to keep this informal and conversational. So first and foremost, want to thank you all for coming. I really appreciate your time. As Jay-Z says, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me, and I appreciate that. So when I talk about social capital or socio-capitalism, what prompted this conversation and these type of presentations is a Mark Cuban blog post when he talked about socio-capitalism. And he was writing about it in the context of the 2016 election and what candidates weren't leveraging and what they weren't doing to better connect with their audience. And the ones that were gaining traction and were gaining ground and grassroots support were the ones who were really adapting to the shifting landscape, the shifting grounds we're seeing today in our culture with all the tools we have in our disposal, all the arrows we can put in our quiver. I'm a true believer, and Angie has said this a number, or in some way she has communicated this, but your net worth is your network. And it's really important, the relationships you build throughout your career and your life, and how that can impact what you're trying to do, your mission, your purpose, your passion. And so a lot of the things that I talk about is often targeted towards non-traditional students or rebels, pirates, round pegs trying to fit in square holes. But even if you follow the glide path right to big law, some of these points may come up in the future state for you, or you may be thinking about them now. The thing about law school and becoming a lawyer, it really impacts your mental health. I think I've heard it here a couple times, and it's important to guard your mental health, to invest in your mental health, and to protect it because it is sacred. Without being in a good mental state or good flow, everything else can crumble around you. So it's always important to keep that front and center and be intentional about how you're thinking about yourself, your career, your identity, your self-esteem, and as well as your family and close relationships. So when I talk about social capital, it's a derivative of capital. A lot of people, when they think capitalism, they think short-term profits. But capitalism is a system that's also based on reinvesting short-term profits to have future growth, to have future resources. So taking the short-term allocation, investing it for a future state. And when we talk about social capital, that's exactly what it is. How can you reinvest in yourself on a daily and short-term basis to have long-term gains? Muhammad Yunus, a Nobel Prize winner and microfinance pioneer, said, all human beings are entrepreneurs. When we were in the caves, we were all self-employed, finding our food, feeding ourselves. That's where human history began. As civilization came, we suppressed it. We became labor because they stamped us labor. You are labor. We forget that we are entrepreneurs. And so wherever you are in your career journey, it's important to think that you have at least one startup in your life, and it's your career. And that we're all in permanent beta, we're all evolving, and we're all trying to better ourselves. And the more you can think about being in permanent beta, and that finish is an F word, I think the better off you'll be in your career. There's a couple things I want to hit before the conversation is over. One, I call the investment banking rule. It's the side with the most options wins, or the more options you have, the better off you'll be. The second one is called the entrepreneurship rule. It's how can you add value to the market, and then how can you capture a piece of that value. The third one is putting together your puzzle to inform your direction and competitive advantage. The fourth is you're the founder of your career. If you take nothing else away from this presentation, I hope you pick up the book, The Startup of You by Reid Hoffman. A lot of these points are based off the startup of you. And the point being permanent beta, develop a lifelong commitment to continuous personal growth. The sixth one is your network is your net worth. And then the seventh one is adopt a craftsmanship mindset. Be so good they can't ignore you. And that's based off the book So Good They Can't Ignore You by Newport. It's another book I highly recommend. The eighth principle is discover the adjacent possible. I think in the adjacent possible is where you can find a really neat creative outlet for your purpose or your mission. And the ninth is just talking about the evolving state of capitalism. And the 10th is what's next. Now, I consolidated this presentation quite a bit, so many of these points I'll just touch upon, but happy to double click on any of these points with anyone who reaches out after the presentation. So in investment banking and deal making is a lot of what I do now. We often say the side with the most options wins. You may think you're going to go into big law. It could be your primary preference. It's where you've crafted your identity. But maybe that's not the road you ultimately decide to take. Or maybe at some point you decide to exit. And it's important to have options, that you've created a career, you've created a network, you created options for yourself, that you have possibility, and that you can have different identities when you think about yourself and where you want to be. And so it's always important to think that the side with the most options wins. Give yourself optionality. Although you may think you're absolutely positive what you want to do, that can change, that can evolve. And the more you set yourself up for success by investing in your network, the better off you'll be. When you're developing a successful business model or career, I think, and I found that it's boiled down to two items. How can you add value to the market, and how can you capture some of that value? I think the most successful businesses, the most successful careers have found a way to add value and capture the value. When you see a failure is when you're adding value to the market, but you're not capturing any of the value. Or if your whole goal or intention is to capture value in the market, but you're not adding any value to the market. There was a reference, and this was much bigger in 2018, about China has developed a China social credit system covering over 1.3 billion people and giving them social credit scores. And by 2020, it was going to be mandatory that you participate in it. And it's basically big data meets big brother. It was very Black Mirrors-esque. And you can Google it and read more about that. Pretty terrifying if you think about it. And it was just credit by another name, or some sort of capital you're building by another name. And based on your social credit in China, you could do free test drives, you get free access to services, you get discounted access to services. It was much like a credit score. And what I found most interesting about it is the 5 factors they used to monitor somebody. It was the credit history, their fulfillment capacity. Alibaba defines this as a user's ability to fulfill his or her contract obligations. It was the personal characteristics, the ability to verify personal information such as someone's mobile number and address. It was behavior and preference, video game players versus diaper purchasers. System will nudge citizens away from purchases and behaviors the government does not like. And it was friends and interactions. It would judge your network. So the 5 ways they judge you is credit history, fulfillment capacity, personal characteristics, behavior and preference, and friends and interactions. Super subjective, obviously, but I thought it was very interesting the framework they used to give you a social credit score and how people had to kind of play that game or are playing that game to succeed in that system. Another one, if we want to kind of have an analogy to, or a comparative framework is in America is LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, we all have a social selling index. So even if you're not in sales, they give you a social selling index. And I can share the link with you on what that is, but you can look up your SSI and how they rate you. And they rate you based on how you establish your personal brand, how you're connected to what people, what insights are you engaging with, and how they're judging your relationships on the system. Now, I think when we talk about LinkedIn, when we talk about Facebook, when we talk about Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, I think those are just tools that can amplify the network you have. I don't think they replace, rather supplement. But it's important to see how these systems interact and how they can help you leverage what you're trying to do or your career, your mission at the end of the day. I think it's table stakes to be to master your craft, and I'll talk about that a little more, and to be very focused. But it's also important to not ignore the evolving landscape of how our world is changing, how our society is changing, how we work and live day to day is changing. So what does this all mean? I think at the end of the day, given that it's a new year, it's always a good time to take a personal inventory. I like to take an annual inventory. And today I would like you to think about what are your assets, both hard and soft skills. What are your aspirations and values? And what are the market realities? Where can you play that you're adding value and you can capture some of that value? I think that's the personal inventory or snapshot I like to take from time to time. And I think it's a good framework to think within. The book I mentioned, I think it's a foundational book to this presentation or conversation. It's called The Startup of You. Its tagline is adapt to the future, invest in yourself, and transform your career.
I put the links
they say,
that you mentioned in the chat box so they can have them.
Great. And the book is based around 3 puzzle pieces that inform your direction and competitive advantage. One is taking an inventory of your assets, your hard and soft skills. The second one is deciding and evaluating what your aspiration and values are. The line that stuck out to me in the book is, you remake yourself as you grow and the world changes. Your identity doesn't get found, it emerges. And I think that's a pretty compelling line. And the third one is the market realities. Your skills, experience, and other soft assets, no matter how special you think you are, won't give you an edge unless they meet the needs of a paying market. In other words, what will the market pay for? Another concept from that book is permanent beta. Finished is an F word. We're all works in progress. It doesn't matter whether you're a recent graduate, seasoned professional, or reinventing yourself mid-career. Great people, like great companies, are always evolving. They're never finished and never fully developed. Each day presents an opportunity to learn more, do more, grow more. Kind of how are you investing in yourself? Permanent beta is a lifelong commitment to continuous personal growth. It is a mindset. It is the mindset of every entrepreneur of life. And you can't see it now, but this is a screenshot I took of the book. You are the founder of your career. It says whether you're a lawyer, and I highlighted lawyer for today's discussion, or doctor, or teacher, or engineer, or even a business owner, today you need to also think of yourself as an entrepreneur at the helm of at least one living, growing startup venture, your career. And I think it's very helpful to think about it like that, because if you're taking a gap year, if you're going to enter law school, at some point, and Angie can testify to this, in your 1L year, you just be like, what the hell am I doing? Why am I here? Am I a masochist? Where is the light at the end of the tunnel? I know there were some points in my 1L year, I was miserable. I didn't know if I wanted to do it. There was no blueprint. I did not know any attorneys at the time. Angie, I think we've talked about being non-traditional students, not having lawyers in our network, not having a blueprint to follow.
Yeah.
That's why I think
I tell all my students, I was like, I think I spent most of 1L year just curled up in the fetal position crying. I don't think I was doing it the right way at all. it was rough. It's a really hard transition, and even people who go into it with family members who are lawyers, sometimes your family members don't prepare you well for it either. So, it is a really rough transition, and don't be surprised if you get into law school and all of a sudden you're questioning like your entire existence. Like that's how I was. So don't worry. Everyone feels that way at some point. But yeah, I think it's exactly like Renwei said. You have to just decide you're going to take your own destiny in your hands and that you're going to start driving that ship. And you can decide that at any point. You can decide it today, even though, you went through maybe your first semester and law school ran over you like a truck. You can decide it, right now. So definitely, take away some of the lessons that he's sharing with you today.
Yeah, whether it's your first year in law school, your first year out of law school, sometimes we reevaluate our priorities and goals and what makes us happy and what's most important to us. I do think you can make money, do well by doing good, and you don't have to give up your side hustle. You don't have to give up your labor of love. I think it's so important to find your flow. Just having a flashback to law school, I definitely think gained 20 pounds for 1 hour year because I ate too much Wendy's and Taco Bell with friends on late night studies.
Diet of pizza.
Yeah. And then the another concept in this book is I to the power of we. Your power is exponentially raised by your network, aka don't be an asshole. I think if you haven't gone into law school, you're going to realize, wow, this is a pretty pretentious field. This is a pretty stodgy profession. Some people are great, lifelong friends. You might marry someone in your cohort in 1 hour year. And then some people you're going to be like, wow, that person's pretty smart, but he or she is an asshole. And I don't really want to deal with that person. And so you're going to see, you're going to be in a bubble if you haven't entered law school real quick. And that's just the fact of the matter. And it's going to be important to how you adjust to that bubble, how you manage and protect your time, how you develop your schedule, and who you choose to socialize with.
Yeah, I think it's important to know the people that you're in law school with. If you're going to law school right now and you're communicating with everyone remotely, it's just going to be harder to get to know people. You're going to have to be really intentional about it. You're going to have to set up, group meets for your class. You're going to have to go out of your way to set up social events. I know it feels awkward. I know it's hard, but please, please, please do it, because the classmates and the bonds that you build in law school, you will take with you throughout the rest of your career. And, they might not immediately provide value to you in the form of a job or in the form of referrals or anything like that, but you'll be surprised, as you guys all move up in the world, once you hit 6, 7, 8 years, you'll find that like the total class clown is now the GC of a Fortune 500 company, and you're like, wait, what in the world? Like, how did you get there? And, I think you just have to realize that all of you are on a different track. And, sometimes the people behind you will excel ahead of you. So be sure you're connecting with your lower classmen as well, your 1Ls and people who come behind you, because they might blaze ahead of you and they might land these amazing positions. I was really fortunate that one of the students that I TA'd for when I was a 3L, he was a 1L, ended up going to a major fashion company, and he was working in like a low-level counsel role when all of a sudden the associate GC had to go on permanent medical leave and left, and they decided to promote him into an associate GC role, and he was like 3 years out of law school. And he panicked, and he had this huge trademark portfolio, and he came to our firm and offered it to me because he remembered me. And so, I think it's really important that you build those relationships even with the people behind you, ahead of you and behind you. Social capital, I think you need to know that it's not just about trying to get to know people who are more important than you. It's also just about being a good human, right? So know that.
Yeah, you can do well by doing good. Another story from law school, I think I was part of this affinity group, and I'm going to talk about I to the power of we. Your power is exponentially raised by your network. Last minute, someone asked me to be an usher to help seat the audience for these speakers in this affinity group. And I did that, and I didn't think anything of it, but I met the speakers by being the usher and seating everyone. And then later on, when I was interviewing 3L year, that general counsel came back to our school and was like, hey, I know you. You were the usher here. And we talked about that, and we exchanged our pleasantries, and it was a really good, easy interview. Ended up getting the job because we had that past connection. So building that social network, your social capital, you're creating serendipitous moments. You're having fancy meet cutes, you're having low key meet cutes, whatever it takes. But it's investing in the network is chapter 4 of the book. And one excerpt I like is I versus we. It's a false choice. It's both. Your career success depends on both your individual capabilities and your network's ability to magnify them. Think of it as I to the we. An individual's power is raised exponentially with the help of a team or a network. But just as 0 to the 100th power is still 0, there's no team without the individual. The book is titled The Startup of You. Really, the you is at once singular and plural. And I think the easiest way to sum it up is your network is your net worth. I've heard a couple of people say that. I really like that. Some other concepts of chapter 4.
Actually,
how you and your network.
I can provide a real world anecdote to that. So let's talk about, LinkedIn, right? So when I first started using LinkedIn 10 years ago, I was using it as like a resume, right? So I didn't really interact with anyone. I didn't ever comment on anything. I didn't post anything myself. I was too scared to even share things myself. And then, so at the beginning of last year when COVID hit, is when I really changed the way that I started interacting on LinkedIn. So I happened to connect with a couple of women lawyers who were already very active on LinkedIn. And they had huge networks. They had, thousands and thousands of followers. I think I had maybe 1,000 followers from like the whole 10 years that I had been on LinkedIn. And that might sound like a lot, but just like 10 years, it's not very much at all. And then starting in January, when I started commenting on their content, following these women and making my own content, all of their networks started seeing my stuff and they started bonding with me. And from January of last year to December, my connections grew exponentially. I'm now at like 8,200 connections or something. I mean, I literally get requests all the time. And it's mostly because I'm creating content that is relevant to this audience, but it's my network that is working for me because all of my connections, their second connections, will see when they comment on my stuff. And, it grows exponentially very, very quickly. So you really need to make your network work for you. So if you're just now getting on LinkedIn and you are a student and you don't have any social capital, you feel, connect with people who do have social capital, because when you start engaging with them, people will start seeing you just from your engagement with them. So definitely work other people's social capital too. And that will eventually be part of your own social capital.
Yeah. And I'll transition the second part to talk about more a different book entirely, because this conversation does have a little LinkedIn bias. One, I met Angie on LinkedIn through commenting. Two, The Startup of You is written by Reid Hoffman, who is the founder of LinkedIn. And so chapter 4 is about a lot of the ways is how to use LinkedIn through second and third degree connections. But what I like is he talks about this concept of setting up an IPF or interesting people fund to guarantee that you spend investing in your network. And I just love that idea. Put money away so you can buy coffee, you can buy a meal, you can drive 100 miles to meet someone. Now, during this pandemic, it's a little different. We can go back to the virtual world. But it was always an interesting concept I found, and one that I used and leveraged and worked really well. Which reminds me, if you ask someone to coffee, let's say post-pandemic, you should purchase the coffee for them. So there's just some little things you shouldn't, yeah. So just some P's and Q's on that as well.
I think in pandemic times, the I guess analogy to that though is time, because I think right now, everybody has a little bit more time to be connecting with students. I have seen a lot more attorneys connecting with students, so you should be investing more time into blocking off time blocks where you're meeting interesting people. Take time to actually get to know your or your LinkedIn connections, get to know them for real, using Zoom or something like that. But so you can't take them out for coffee, but you can do a virtual Zoom chat. So invite them. You have to put in the effort though. Like if you put in the effort to set the meeting, create that circumstance, then it makes it so much easier for the attorney. Don't make them reach out to you, send back their availability, try to get your availability. I mean, do all that for them.
Yeah. There's a couple times when I was trying to get a meeting or whatever, and I told someone I would just be in town, and I wasn't in town. Like if they accepted the meeting, I would make sure I was in town. It would be the only reason I was in town. And sometimes that involves a plane ticket. Crazy stories, but I truly believe in it. The other book, and we're flying through this concept. So again, if you want the deck, I'm going to share it with Angie. Angie can share it with y'all. Another foundational book is So Good They Can't Ignore You. It's by Newport, and it's Why Skills Trump Passion in the Quest for Work You Love. The tagline is, follow your passion is bad advice. Here's what you should do instead. And definitely apologize. I didn't see any other speakers say, just follow your passion and everything will work out. But if they did, no offense to that concept, but I don't believe in that. I believe you become passionate about what you become good at. It's called the Craftsman Mindset, and it's a concept from this book. So I'll double click on there in a second. Here, they call it the power of career capital. What do you have when you have career capital? You have three things. You can be creative in your work, you have impact, and you have control. Again, coming back to the mental health, sometimes in lawyer land or in the law universe, you don't necessarily have control of what you're doing, of your schedule, of your tasks and duties, and that can impact your happiness in your work. And sometimes you do. What a lot of people say is you can't be creative as an attorney. And I think that's a false narrative. I think there's plenty of ways to be creative as an attorney, exploring the frontier, playing in the adjacent possible, but pushing the boundaries of your profession. There's so many ways to have creative outlets. I think Angie has probably 12 creative things I see that she does on a weekly basis. But yeah, the economics of a great job, career capital, is creativity in what you do, having an impact, and having some sort of control. And it says these traits that are rare and they define great work. They're rare and valuable. And how can you build up your social capital so that you have career capital? It talks about the adjacent possible, forming new possibilities. One excerpt I really like that I'll read here now is, scientific breakthroughs, as we just learned, require that you first get to the cutting edge of your field. So it's table stakes to be good at what you do. Only then can you see the adjacent possible beyond. So again, becoming good at what you do will foster your passion. The space where innovative ideas are almost always discovered. Here's the leap I made as I pondered so on and so forth. A good career mission is similar to a scientific breakthrough. It's an innovation waiting to be discovered in the adjacent possible of your field. If you want to identify a mission for your working life, therefore, you must get to the cutting edge, the only place where these missions become visible. And I think Steve Jobs said it's only at the end can you connect all the dots. So at the front end, you're putting together this puzzle. You may not understand it, but I think a good way is to follow your flow. When you get into that flow state, you're really good at what you do, you're having an impact, you're being creative, and you have control, you should follow that. Again, if you're doing that and it's all pro bono and you're not getting paid and you have to provide for your family, well, that should be a bootstrap exercise. That shouldn't be your mission priority. Is there anything you have to add there, Angie, before I move to the next? I know I'm flying through these concepts at this point, but just monitoring the time.
Yeah, I would say it's funny because I don't know if if I raced to the cutting edge in my career, but I think I raced to a point where I started to see things that I wanted to change in the legal profession. I went through it myself, and oftentimes I wonder to myself, okay, did I practice long enough to be able to guide younger lawyers? Because I only practiced for 5 years full time before launching Leg Up Legal. And you might think that that's really inexperienced, but it's definitely long enough for you to start identifying things that you struggle with in your early career. And so for me, it only took going through those first 5 years to start realizing where a lot of the holes already were. And so I don't know if I really had to race to the cutting edge, but I definitely had to get to a point where I started to see what was missing. So maybe it's not just, what could come next in this would be good to have, but you could also look at what's missing in what's going on, as you go through your journey.
Yeah, and if you don't have the time in the seat or the miles on the tires to be the cutting edge, I think the other way to be on the edge is to be on the adjacent possible. I don't think anyone would say, I, in my career, am the best lawyer I can possibly be. I don't have enough experience. But where I think the adjacent possible is in what I do is in partnerships, is in strategic engagements, is into working with another entity and driving joint ventures. And I have a lot of fun with that. And my JD or passing the bar, acting as a lawyer helps supplement that work. But that's when I find I'm in the biggest flow. I know big law attorneys that absolutely love what they do, that are partners because they're very good at it and they're being creative in their deal structure or whatever it may be. Statistically, in terms of anecdotally and statistically, most people are not going to become big law partners. Either they'll self-select out or they just weren't picked on that track. And at that point, they might think of different opportunities, different career paths.
Well, the most economics are just stacked against you. So
yeah,
you just simply not promote everyone to a big law partner. And they don't tell you that. They hold that carrot in front of all the associates like, all of you can make it, when that's not really true. So.
Yeah, when I did this talk in 2018, there was a couple, big law associates in the crowd, and they actually circled back with me a year or two after. They're like, it didn't really hit me then, but it's certainly hitting different now that I'm looking at exit opportunities. I'm leaving that glide path or flywheel. I think lawyers have a good glide path to big law. Finance people have a good glide path to being investment associates. Doctors have a good glide path. You got to get through all the schooling, but it's not for everybody. People self-select out. They want to do different things. It's not where they're hitting their flow state. It's not their vibe. Per se. So again, this is where I think it's so important to have built up your network along the way, to not have been an asshole. It's sometimes there's pleasantries, there's niceties, and there's just don't be a jerk. I think that's one simple rule. I can't believe how many times I've had to tell people that, you should just not be a jerk.
And also,
yeah, but now more than ever.
Side of your industry. I found when I wanted to go to become an entrepreneur, I looked around, my entire network was lawyers. and that's okay because that's still highly related to what I do. But I didn't know a lot of people who were creating startups. I didn't know a lot of people who were in the business world. I didn't know people who were advising startups. So I had to go build all of that. Now, if I would have actually been smart enough to do that from the beginning of law school, where I was connecting with professionals in lots of different fields, that might have led to other business opportunities or lots of things that I could have done earlier in the game. But yeah, make sure that you don't just put your head down and connect with people who are in the immediate, periphery. Make sure that you're connecting with people who are also in other industries.
Yeah, in the book Start of You, there's a lot of case studies they have that it wasn't the first relationship they have, it was through a weak connection or a secondary or tertiary connection that that an awesome opportunity arose. So the more you lend yourself and put yourself in different positions that give you options or best alternative to negotiated agreements, I think the better chance you'll have in winning in what you're trying to do. And again, it's not just following your passion, it's finding what the market will pay for, even if you're bootstrapping until that happens. There's a lot of people, I think, in the social media craze that skip the bootstrapping phase and they're like, well, I'm passionate about it and I have this many followers, so I'm just going to do it full time. But they didn't really put the business case around it. They didn't really find out when they would burn through all their cash and have no savings.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was going to launch this startup, I went through a startup accelerator and they really pushed me on the business model, how we were going to generate money, all of it. And it made me really rethink it. I mean, because of course, I had a passion for doing this, but turning it into an actual survivable business was a whole nother story. So I think it is really important that you take time to think through these decisions. But it's okay to take calculated risks. Don't think that you're ever too junior in your career to start taking some calculated risks. You don't always have to just dive, like Renwei said. You can do it as a side hustle. I had lawyer friends that invested in all sorts of side hustles. They one of them created a bakery and was like doing that on the side. Another person was like selling stuff on Amazon. I think you have a lot of talents in you and you don't have to just be a lawyer. Like that doesn't have to be the defining thing about you.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point. And I think I've heard a couple past discussions you've had, Angie, where people have gotten so wrapped their identity was passing the bar and becoming an attorney. Several years down the road, it wasn't making them happy, whether the circumstance they were in, the environment surrounding them, and they were looking to do something else, but they were afraid to do anything else besides be a lawyer, because that's all anyone has ever known them as for the last several years. And that's what they've wrapped their identity as. And so when I talk about side hustle, bootstrapping, having a whole identity, it's making sure that you identify as more than just an attorney in whatever you're doing. You are an individual, you are an entrepreneur, you can add a lot of value besides just your legal skills and capabilities and experience.
Absolutely.
So I'll wrap up here. The 10 things I said I wanted to hit, and then I'd love to just open it to Q&A. Again, I don't know anyone who has all the answers. I'm still trying to figure it out myself. I think when you talk to people, mentors or people you see successful, they're going to be like, I don't know. I mean, I took a winding path. It was very curvy, up and down. I had no idea I'd end up here, but I followed my flow. I followed my flow state. I did this, this, and this. I took chances. It was risk and a lot of luck. The most successful people I talk to always say a derivative of their success is from luck. That luck played a huge role in what they do. And without luck, without that meet cute, without that chance, without that serendipitous moment, they don't know where they'd be. They'd probably land on their feet because they gave themselves options. They were adding value. They were capturing value, but they might not be where they are today without that luck as an element play. And I think a lot of what I've done has been purely chance and luck. So the first one was the investment banking rule, giving yourself options at the end of the day. The second one was the value, add value, capture value. The third one was putting together your puzzle to inform your direction and competitive advantage, doing that inventory, that self-check, your assets, hard and soft, your values, what really gets you going in the morning, what drives you, what puts you in your flow state, and what the market will pay for. The fourth one is you're the founder of your career, as mentioned in the startup of you. The fifth one is permanent beta. We're all evolving. Develop a lifelong commitment to continuous personal growth. The sixth one is network. Your net worth is your net worth. Your network is your net worth, I to the power of we. Your power is exponentially raised by your network. The seventh is adopt a craftsmanship mindset. Be so good they can't ignore you. Find that adjacent frontier. Find that adjacent possible. Then social capitalism. This isn't your father's or mother's capitalism. It's not all about the bottom buck. It's about doing well and doing good. And the 10th is what's next. Investing in yourself, taking short-term profits, accumulating these resources to further production in your career and in life in general.
Awesome. Thank you for that wrap up and summary. So does anybody have any questions for Renwei? Please feel free to jump on camera and ask away, or if you can't ask on camera, you can put it in the chat box and we'll address those questions now.
Hello, my name is Stacy. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was great. I appreciate it. And for your time, thank you. I was just wondering, you had mentioned something about the SSI or something about like LinkedIn, like measuring. You said you were gonna send us like a link or something. Can you please elaborate more on that also, please?
I think we're not all going to have an Angie SSI score, but what is really neat about it, like I barely use it, but Angie's a power user of LinkedIn. What I think is neat about it is you can at least compare yourself to your peers. So it has you and it has who they consider your peers of your network. And so you at least want to be average, I think, in how you're using the network, how you're engaging with insights, how you're putting your professional and personal brand out there. You don't have to be the top, but if you're at the bottom, maybe that's a New Year's resolution to become more engaged on LinkedIn.
Okay, I just put the link in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm curious as to like what actually changes these metrics significantly, because I've been pretty much stuck at the same score for a long time. So it's like 77 out of 100. It's been there a long, long time. So, but apparently I'm at the top 1% of our industry. So that only tells me lawyers don't use LinkedIn.
I am not surprised at all. I'm
so
not surprised at all.
In the entrepreneurship circles that I now run in, everybody's on LinkedIn. And then lawyers were like slowly getting to the party. So, law students as well. I think, a lot of them have been using it as a resume for a really long time. They just don't realize that LinkedIn has now become really a content platform. It's really become more of a social platform than it used to be. So we're a little late to that party, but you can find a lot of success very quickly once you get on. So what other questions do you guys have?
Hi. Yeah, I had a question about what to do during the gap year. So I decided I will apply this September, but I will have a whole gap year within that range. And so I have some ideas on what to do that year, but I don't know if you'll have any ideas on what will be beneficial towards law school.
Are you working for an attorney or anything right now?
No, I worked for an attorney for a year, but it was last year.
Okay, and do you know what practice areas you're interested in?
Yes.
Okay, was that attorney somebody who's practicing in those practice areas or no?
No.
Okay,
No,
then my suggestion is to go find an attorney in the practice areas that you're interested in and try to work for them or work with them in some capacity, whether that's volunteering to do stuff for them. You could always write, social media content for them, or you could write blogs for them, or you could find a way to get involved in a bar association, help out people in a bar association. I think that you should spend time trying to get to know more about the practice areas you think you're interested in. So connecting with a lot of lawyers, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, doing informational interviews, trying to build those relationships. As you're doing more informational interviews, you will naturally have people that you're drawn to. Some people you'll do an informational interview and you're like, that didn't go so well. Some people you'll do an informational interview and you'll think, wow, that person is somebody I really want to learn from. And so you need to find some excuses to learn from that person. So I would, definitely find out what they're interested in. What are they doing? Could you help them in some way so that you can get some substantive experience and learn from these professionals what you're really about to get into. But what do you think, Renwei?
Yeah, I agree. And I would say I wouldn't put too much pressure on getting into something legally related if it's not there. But find something that hits upon your story. Why did you do it? How did you think it would benefit you? Because oftentimes, as a 0L or 1L, you think you want to do this specific practice, but then by 3L, you do something entirely different based on what you did 2L summer. So again, to me, it's motion causes emotion. Just do something where you're adding value to the market and you're capturing value to the market, and you'll be set. If you could do something legally related, that would be ultimately helpful. It couldn't hurt.
Yeah. And again, even if you can't find a job working for an attorney, there's so many other ways that you can be learning from an attorney. As long as you're building the relationships with that attorney, they can mentor you and, help you, give you opportunities, even if it's not, monetary, you'll be gaining value from it. So.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
One more question, a follow-up about the gap year and connecting with other lawyers. Like I've done a few informational interviews to lawyers, but then getting to the next step to like asking them if they have any opportunities for me or if they can even mentor me, I feel like there's a big gap between that, and I don't know if like how to do that, go from like the informational interview and then like build a connection, because it almost feels like in a way kind of fake, because they know like I don't know if it's fake or necessarily like we need to talk about something, or like she knows I'm already interested in that field. So
well, that's a great question. So, and many people struggle with this. So turning that informational interview into something more means that during the informational interview, you should be asking them for advice. Ask them, are there any groups or associations that I can join to learn more about your practice area? Are there articles that I can read to learn more about your practice area? Are there actions that you can take after the meeting to know more about what they're interested in? And or are there any events that are coming up that you're attending that I could attend with you, virtual or otherwise? And then after that, you take the advice, and then you have an excuse to report back to them and say, hey, I took your great advice and this is how it benefited me. And it gives you just one more thing to reach out to them about. And then you ask them in there, do you have any other piece of advice for me? And then you kind of keep building that relationship and keep checking in with them. And then eventually that'll usually turn into some sort of opportunity, whether, it's, I really, really enjoyed this article that, you sent to me. I would love to maybe help write an article. Is there a topic that you're interested in that I could do some research on and maybe help you write an article about that? Something like that. You have to be a little bit creative in what you propose. So, but the more that you can just keep that connection going, the better. It doesn't always have to be multiple meetings. You could just be doing multiple follow-up emails afterwards. So definitely, pay attention in the informational interview, absorb what they're saying, and take actions afterwards that you can actually report back to them and keep that relationship going. If you just pepper them with questions for 30 minutes to an hour and then just walk away and never say anything again, they're not going to remember you when you come back and ask for something.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you so much.
Any other tips, Renwei?
Yeah, I think there's just a level of authenticity in meeting someone, really understanding their story and hearing how they connected the dots, even if it doesn't lead anywhere in terms of your career. At least you made a friend. At least you made a connection, and you're building your network. I truly believe it's a contact sport. It takes a lot of contacts across a lot of different fields. But if we're just talking about speaking with different lawyers at different stages of your career, you'll find a match. Someone will want to engage with you. Someone will want to give their time, resources, labor, and energy to you, but it's not going to necessarily be the first person you talk to, third person you talk to, fifth person you talk to. It could be the 25th person you talk to. But I always like to say, get in where you fit in, where there's a good match, when you get into a good flow and have a good vibe with someone. That's the relationships I would invest in.
And yeah, maybe the first meeting doesn't go the best. Actually, one of my mentors who I've had with me for, 10 years now, our very, very first meeting was like disastrous. And so, I met him, he came to our law school to speak. I met him very quickly in the hallway, and I was trying to get to know him, and he was rushing out, and he was like, I've got 10 seconds, walk with me to the elevator. And I was like trying to get to know this man. And then, he left, and then I just felt too shy to ever reach out to him. Well, I knew that he came to the law school every year, right? So the next year I tried again. So this time I planned ahead. So I sent him an email And I said, hey, I know you're coming to the law school to speak. This time I'd love to, get lunch or something right after the talk and talk to you. And so that we have time. And we planned out a time. And then the next meeting went really, really well. And then we continued talking, and he actually hired me for an externship. I got to work with him for a summer. And then after law school, he became one of my clients. So I think, it's not always going to be the first meeting that is, mentorship at first sight, but it might be the second or third or fourth. So.
Yeah, and I think if you're going in with what can you give, what value can you add to that relationship, I think that would be helpful. Is there something that they're looking for that needs to be done? Is there some task you can do? Given that you're in your gap year, maybe time is the most valuable asset you have to give to something, some sort of project, while you're waiting to do something else. I found that can always be fruitful. It's laying down a lot of seeds to reap the harvest later.
I do have one last question.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna ask, how did you know you wanted to go into law school? I know that you said like you had mentioned like you don't believe like following your passion, but I mean like that's not how people like get their calling or something like that. But how did you know? Because I'm still trying to figure out like my next steps, and I would be interested in knowing more about your journey and like both of your journeys. Yeah, thank you.
Renwei, you go first.
Oh, I was going to say, so I was in finance and I did my MBA, and this was during the Great Recession. And in finance, they say don't let a good recession go to waste. So you try to invest in yourself during that time when everyone's struggling. And that was another reason for this presentation. It was I've been thinking about it for a while because of the Great Recession, and now because of COVID, a lot of people are jobless and can't find a job. And I knew after the MBA, I could either go back to finance or go into consulting. Those were kind of the two maps for me. But I took a couple law courses at University of Chicago, really liked them, and decided to apply to a couple law schools. And the scholarship was good enough that I thought, I'll try it. If I don't do law school now, I'll never do it. And in 3 years, I'm going to be 3 years older, regardless if I do law school or if I don't. So I'm just going to jump in. But I did it. I probably should have did a lot more self introspection and did the business case for it and see if it really made sense for me. But at the time, it was just an avenue. It was just a possibility. I was like, hey, took a couple law school courses, liked it. I'll see if I really enjoy it. And if I don't, I'll drop out after the first year and go back to finance. I happened to get through the first year. It was a roller coaster. It was rocky, but I held on, white knuckled it, and got through law school. And that's my story.
Yeah, I really was not one of these people that grew up knowing I wanted to be a lawyer at all. I thought I wanted to be one of those people on Mad Men. So I actually went to undergrad focused on advertising. And then I went to work for an ad agency. And then, like Renwei said, the recession hit and derailed all my plans. So I got laid off from the ad agency. And I actually thought about going back to do an MBA or law school. And since I didn't really know about either of those, I decided to find out more by talking to lawyers. Now, I didn't know any lawyers because no one in my family was pursuing law school ever. They're all healthcare engineers, all that. So I literally just took a phone book, I flipped it open, and I started cold calling lawyers. And I got ignored a lot. I got a lot of secretaries who told me they didn't want me to talk to their lawyers. And then eventually I talked to some lawyers, and one of them became my mentor. And he asked me if I wanted to come work for him as a temp for like 3 months. And during that time, he would introduce me to more lawyers. And the 3 months actually ended up turning into a year and a half because I enjoyed it so much. And I was trying to learn more about so many practice areas. And then eventually I found practice areas that I was interested in, and then I applied to law school. So I took a lot of time for exploration. I really, really wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to get out with a mountain of debt and not have a job. I was really, really scared of that. So I really wanted to talk to a lot of lawyers, get their experiences. And in that year and a half that I worked for him, I probably connected with like hundreds of lawyers. He would take me down to Dallas Bar Association when they had continuing legal education classes and introduced me to dozens of people. And it was like just overwhelming sometimes, but it was great. I mean, I got to know a gazillion people in Dallas. So I think it's really important to take the time to do your exploration.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and then deciding to go to law school and choosing which law school is a whole nother conversation, and I'm sure Angie could talk about that for weeks.
Yeah, yeah. I don't have any time for that, but you can reach out to me afterwards, and I'm happy to talk to you more about that. So, but thank you so much, Renwei, for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. I loved hearing about all of your experiences, and I think that, you know, social capital is definitely an inherent thing in the legal profession. You need to have connections. You need to have social capital in order to get business, in order to get all, you know, jobs, everything. So, so I think it's important that students start thinking about this topic now. And I would highly encourage you guys to follow Renwei. He also writes for Above the Law, so you'll see his content from time to time as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Other than that, tomorrow we have our first virtual networking happy hour of the year. So we do these happy hours every other week, and we invite lawyers, pre-law students, current law students, and we'll actually break you out into breakout rooms. So we spend a very small amount of time in the main room where we do introductions, and then I split you out into breakout rooms where you actually get to know someone. So come and connect with somebody new. All right, everybody. Thanks so much, Renwei.